Hello, I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is episode number 77. We are just having a bit of trouble connecting to our Facebook page for Family First. So if you go there, you'll see there's a link to our YouTube where you can watch it on YouTube or to my personal page, Bob McCoskrie. So we are available across the internet, but just Facebook page Family First for some reason has been shut down. So, everyone's trying to shut us down, but that's okay. We will break through. Episode number 77. You can, of course, come to YouTube and we'll see your comments come through there. Tonight, we analyse the outcomes of the Australian election, and is it all Trump's fault, as some commentators are arguing, or are Conservatives in really bad shape in Australia? There seems to be no shortage of female political leaders and media stating there's a massive problem with misogynistic abuse. But is it true? Can we trust the Ministry of Health in New Zealand based on some of their ideological stances? And we'll find out from this week's panelists which MPs have impressed them and which haven't halfway through the electoral term. Without further ado, let's introduce the panel. We've got the A-team on today, and firstly down to the deep south. Not further. Actually, who is further south? Is it you, Peter, or Rodney? It's you, Peter, is it?
Very good question. I suspect Rodney might be just, but it's a bit like that question, which is further north, Wellington or Picton?
Well, I'm just glad you're here, Peter. I texted you at 2 minutes to 8 and you said you were just timing your run. That's an interesting timing of your run. Anyway, welcome. It's nice to see you. And Rodney, nice to see you as well.
Lovely. I'm more south.
Okay. Heading north in Masterton is Sue Reid. How are you, Sue?
Very well, thank you. Been stacking the firewood this weekend. Well, Brent has.
Yeah,
Still
I know.
And getting the fire ready. So the winter's starting to set in.
I'm glad you've got Mr. Reid well trained, well done. Unlike further north in the Westie, which is Alfred Nardo. How are you, Alfred?
Yeah, obviously a lot more warmer compared to Rodney and Peter, because they've both got woolly jumpers on. I've just got a T-shirt without a singlet. So, something's happening up here in the far north and in West Auckland.
Okay, let's get into the video of the week. Actually, I got two because I couldn't actually figure out which was funnier. The first one is Chuck Schumer, who's a Democrat in the US, and he's talking about the polls. He likes one poll and he dislikes the other. See if you can figure out which it is.
Americans are noticing. The polls this week show Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating since they started polling 80 years ago. The lowest. Yes.
There's a poll out today that has your approval rating lower than any other congressional leader at 17%. Are you concerned that you may be a liability for your party?
Polls come and go. Our party is united. We're on our front foot. We're stepping forward and going after Trump and having real success.
Yeah, they love polls sometimes and sometimes not. It was a competition with this particular video, AOC, Alexandria, or whatever her name is. She reminds me of Chloe Schwarbrick from the Green Party. Anyway, she had a bit of a faux pas.
And this isn't just about Republicans. We need a Democratic Party that fights harder for...
Okay, so anyway, that was kind of the boys one. Yeah. Right, okay, let's check out the image of the week. Actually, team, I actually want you to comment on this one. I want you to tell me this is the image of the week because it's causing a massive stir online. Is this humour or is this sacrilege? And, well, Peter, as our resident Catholic tonight, is this humour or sacrilege?
Humour. Definitely humour. It's called winding up the haters, winding up those with the Trump derangement syndrome. Yeah,
I actually think that Trump is actually just trolling the media and they actually don't realise it. You just have to watch 3 News at 6 p.m. to see that. Rodney, you're, having been recently baptised in water, I mean, is this humour or is this...
Well, I'm pleased that Peter let me off the hook because I saw it and I actually belly laughed because it just made me laugh so much. But I'm a Protestant and I thought, well, I wonder if I'm being reasonable towards my Catholic brethren. So thank you, Peter. Yeah. But it is so funny.
Yeah.
And it's even funny hours later because, the idea of the President of the United States pretending he's going to be the Pope and then putting out this image. And the upset that it caused to all the people that we like to upset. And then the concept of actually the Vatican probably could do with a bit of a rework, and have Elon Musk look through their finances and such like. So it's been funny to me the whole time. Every time I see it, I laugh.
Well, the media has got very exercised about it, and yet they didn't seem to get worried about the sacrilegious nature of the Paris opening Olympics, or whenever Christianity is mocked in general.
No, Trump has his own little special category of concern,
yes.
doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Sue, were you offended by this, or did you go on? Do you want to confess?
All due respect to my Catholic brothers and sisters, but I did laugh and I added to the images as well.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll have to vet that bit. Alfred, you would have been far more pastoral, wouldn't you?
Well, I was actually quite taken back by the cummerbund. Sort of most people won't know, but back in the day, cummerbund was the in thing. When I got married, I had a cummerbund, and so I'm looking at his cummerbund and I'm thinking, like, there must be quite a bit of elastic there, just to sort of try and keep it all in check. So, I'm glad Peter, being our resident. If Peter had been offended, we would all have been saying, "Oh, this is terrible."
Yeah, no, exactly right.
We've got to be careful now. We don't want to offend him. So.
Okay, right. Let's move on to our first topic for tonight: the elections, and obviously, fairly disturbing outcome. I'm actually not quite sure whether. Well, Australia has voted to retain Anthony Albanese as PM for another 3 years. My question is, are the Australians not that smart, Sue, or are the Conservatives that bad? And I said Sue because Sue's Australian from Tasmania, which I think has gone completely left. And of course, there is a link about Canada as well with a similar trend. And so the media have been jumping on Trump causing the world to lurch to the left. But of course, they have failed to mention what's been happening in the UK with Nigel Farage and a strong anti-immigration, strong lurch to the right. But of course, that hasn't quite fit the narrative. So you probably haven't heard about that. But just before I go around the panel, I do just want to play this comment from Dr. Stephen Shavura from Campion College. He's a good friend. I see him often. He's speaking at the Church and State conference that I've spoken at. And also he was at the ARC conference in London in February, and I caught up with him then. But not long after the result of the election came through, he posted this. I thought he nailed it.
Just want to congratulate the Liberal coalition on losing the unlosable election tonight. Albanese is easily the worst Prime Minister in living memory. He's certainly the most uncharismatic Prime Minister in living memory. We've got a cost of living crisis in this country. Inflation is still far too high. We've got a housing crisis, a rental crisis. We're being invaded by immigrants. We had to go through that ridiculous, pointless, expensive, divisive voice campaign, which went absolutely nowhere. This should have been an absolute walkthrough for the Liberal coalition. It should have been a historic win. But you lost because at the end of the day, you don't want to tell the truth. You know that the immigration is out of control, and you agree that it needs to be really radically slashed, but you're too afraid to say it. You're too afraid. If you just said that Australia is in danger of losing its identity because of immigration and you decide to slash it by 60 or 70%, your vote would surge. If you had the guts when asked whether you agree with the UK Supreme Court position that man and woman is defined by biology, if you just had the guts to say, I absolutely agree with that, your vote would have surged. If you had the guts to stick to what you said about Australian school kids not being educated but being indoctrinated and something needs to be done about it, if you had the guts to just stick to that truth that you knew, your vote would have surged. But you don't, because you're more afraid of what a left-wing media that will never support you anyway, you're more afraid of what they think of you than you are of what the Australian public thinks of you. And you're more afraid of a left-wing media than you are for the future of this country, which is going down the drain. We could have turned a corner tonight, but we haven't. Things are now going to get worse because ultimately The Liberal Party is so caught up in its own factions, so afraid of the media, that won't tell the truth and won't do what needs to be done. So congratulations, Liberal Party, on losing the unlosable election. If anyone could do it, it was you.
So, look, let me come around the panel. Perhaps we could just divide it up into two. Firstly, just comments on the Australian results, and then perhaps we can look wider and just look at the connection with Canada, with what happened in the UK. Is it all Trump's fault, as the media narrative is pushing? So, Sue, because you're an Australian, I'd probably need to start with you. Give us a brief overview of your takeout from the election result.
Well, it wasn't due to the Trump effect, like as you said, the reform in the UK. It wasn't a confused result. It was a clear win. What people aren't talking about is the massive swing away from the Greens. The Greens actually didn't deliver a seat at all. They're still in the Senate, and there's still some power and leverage there. But the Greens and the Teals, two Teals, are fighting for two of their seats, one in Victoria, in a strong, it's always been a strong Liberal seat, Coorong, and a New South Wales seat. So even the Teals are a bit dodgy. So it was a clear swing. And as you said, my home state is totally red except for one independent.
Tasmania.
Yeah. But interestingly, there in the Senate fight, Pauline Hanson's daughter could upset Jackie Lambie. So we won't know those results for a little while yet. So there's a few battlegrounds like that. So I think that Dutton lost. It was a low-risk campaign, and he muzzled MPs. He muzzled essential key MPs. So he muzzled Andrew Hastie, Jacinta Nampijinpa Price, and even Claire Chandler, who actually won a seat in Senate. She's the Tasmanian MP who backs women's sports, and she's all over the erasure of women's language, and she's a brilliant senator. But he muzzled them. Claire was waving a 25 cents off fuel tax, off fuel banner, and nothing else. So he muzzled them, and I think there's a clear turn away from Dutton. I think the damage started to set in when he didn't back Moira Deeming, the Victorian state MP, in her case, and didn't deal with that case. He left Pursuto to pursue a fellow Liberal MP and leave him in disarray and leave it wide open when they should actually be a good opposition. So I think he lost momentum there. He also failed to address the overseas, the UK decision court. You've got in Liberal Bridget Archer, who crosses the floor, and she nearly cost, you might remember, she nearly cost the Christian schools their ability for freedom for religion when Scott Morrison absolutely made a total wreck of the religious freedoms that he should have done in his first year. So Bridget Archer was a Liberal MP, but she actually crossed the floor against Peter Dutton. So you've got this undermining of Peter Dutton as well. There was a real... So that's the Liberals. But where the Conservative voice won was actually the Nationals, which is in Queensland. So if you think of the Liberals and Nationals are two parts. Imagine if in New Zealand you had the National Party, and on the South Island you had the Farmers Party, and in the North Island you had the Business Chamber. That's how the coalition works. So there's Nationals in Queensland and there's Liberals in the other states. But the Nationals won. They held their seat. Barnaby Joyce held his seat. Bob Katter won his seat. He's the 80-year-old, like Winston Peters, fighting for the farmers, fighting against the renewable energy and good use of land. He won. So when you back Conservatives, you will win. And Dutton just failed to do that. So collectively, all those parties, One Nation, Family First Australia, Lyle Shelton's party, Bob Katter, One Nation, Trumpet of Patriots, they all got collectively more votes than the Greens. So there's hope. There's hope for the Conservatives in Australia. So the lesson to the Liberals now, unfortunately, potential leaders stuck in Senate. They're tied up in Senate. So you just enter a price and people that you really want to have a go at taking this Liberal Party. So I guess what has happened here in New Zealand has happened to Liberals. They've gouged the Conservatives. There's lessons for Luxon and there's lessons for Hipkins. Interestingly, Kieran McAnulty was at HQ in Sydney. So step up, McAnulty, and take your leadership.
Yeah, okay, it's going to be interesting to watch that. Alfred, what was your takeout? I mean, were you surprised by the result?
No. I've never thought that Dutton was going to be the leader that would get them across the line. You have to remember that Dutton, when he was previously a cabinet minister, a senator, he was the one that had the 501s that sent back to New Zealand. So he's always had this hard edge to him. When he then he became the leader of the Liberal Party, he then tried to soften some of that edge, and it doesn't work. Because once you've got a character and a nature that people have come to know you by, you're better just to stay with it. And so when he tried to be soft on certain issues that young, on that video Stephen was presenting, people said, we just don't believe you. Why don't you just take the stance, be strong, take the line that we've always known you to be, and you get across. And I think, Aussies are, in some cases, like the whole Anzac spirit, there are certain characteristics that are similar. In other words, we're willing to give people a go. And so it's not often that even in New Zealand politics in its history, that we've only had one-term governments. We have had them, but they're very rare and far between. So what happens is that unless you show a clear point of difference, then they're just going to back the incumbents. And Albanese, Wong, I mean, they're just shockers. Internationally in foreign affairs, Wong has got probably one of the worst reputations. And when you read the different commentaries internationally in regards to Australian foreign affairs, she's done a terrible job. And there were so many things that in that video that he could have stood very strong for a conservative voice. He didn't. To be honest, he's the one that lost the election for the Liberals. And so, it's no surprise, from my point of view, that's what happened.
Okay. Rodney, what are your thoughts?
Hard to add to Sue and Alfred. We need Conservative parties to be conservative, and then at least if they lose, you would know the Conservatives lost. Trump showed us that if you stand clearly for policies and articulate them, even against the media, you can motivate a huge base. And I think that's what's necessary, both in Australia and here in New Zealand. And in fact, I believe that Chris Luxon's looking to lose the next election for that very reason, because he's incapable of motivating anyone to support him. For the same reason, because he absolutely doesn't stand for something. The Labor Party will be smart enough to come out with a couple of policies that will motivate the voters that didn't vote last time. And they will win. And Luxon will be absolutely incapable of motivating people, because even core National Party members are fed up, because why vote for someone who's going to be like Jacinda?
Okay. Peter?
Well, I think the Aussies really don't know what's coming for them, because
True.
They really didn't pay too much attention to the energy policies of Chris Bowen and his non-stop march towards net zero, which is seeing coal-fired power stations being closed down. And remember that Australia is one of the great world repositories of coal that exports it by the shipload. And it's got so much, and it's cheap energy. Its economy has been based on coal. But no, Mr. Bowen wants to charge people really through the roof for these renewables, and the march towards net zero is going to cost Aussies, and they're going to have power cuts like they had in Spain and in Portugal last week. The other thing that they don't know that's coming for them is that Penny Wong is probably, and she said this in a podcast last week, she wants to revive the whole voice debate, which was, completely put to bed in that referendum in 2023. But no, the left wing of the Labour Party want to revive the voice. So the Aussies are going to get pretty grumpy pretty quickly when they start seeing huge power bills and the voice get back on the political agenda again. So I think there's going to be some buyer's remorse not too far down the track.
Okay, let's have a look at the wider picture. The media have rushed to Malcolm Turnbull, who was a 3-term Liberal Prime Minister.
Not 3 terms. 3 minutes.
3 years. Yeah, 3 minutes. He rolled Tony Abbott, and then he got rolled himself. I mean, it was, but currently he's the expert because he seems to be anti-Trump. Peter, actually, let's go in reverse order. How much of this is down to Trump? I don't think it is, because the UK,
nothing. No,
Nigel
it's nothing
Farage.
to do with, nothing to do with Donald Trump at all in Australia, I don't believe, because the Australian economy hasn't been affected too much. Their tariffs are like New Zealand. They're going to be 10%, perhaps. Australia is still sending its stuff to the US. Its big trading partner is China anyway. But the media just cannot help themselves. So if we have to have a Liberal spokesman, let's go to the old lefty Liberal in Malcolm Turnbull, billionaire and absolute failure as Prime Minister, the man who rolled Tony Abbott when he said, Tony, you've been behind in 30 consecutive polls, and then Malcolm Turnbull proceeded to be behind in 80 consecutive polls. So he's got zero credibility, if you ask me, as a political commentator.
Maybe he's like Chuck Schumer and he only believes certain polls.
Totally,
but just quickly, Peter, has the world lurched left as a result of Canada and Australia?
I don't think you can say that because of what's happened in the UK in the election, the by-election, and then the local body elections there. Sadly, I think though that New Zealand is lurching left, and we've got a real problem, as Rodney has mentioned, with the National Party. They just refuse. There is, as your friend Stephen Chavura said, they've got a leader who's just got no political courage. And it's going to be the lack of courage that loses the Nats next time round, because I suspect that, bizarrely, the urban vote is going to think rather differently, particularly the Auckland vote, which was so strong for National last year. I can see that being reversed already. Auckland Central is a Green seat. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more Labour reclaiming of seats in Auckland next year. Alfred would know about this more than the rest of us. But I just see a combination of the indoctrination of our university, of our younger people as they get to the age of 18, get to voting age. I just see the country lurching to the left, and the long march through the institutions sadly carries on. And us pensioners can only look on in horror. And frankly, Rodney and I down on the South Island, we just want to pull down the blinds and let you guys have a life in a different land, because frankly, Rodney's through the Kalbarao Gorge from me, but what we read about and hear about in certain parts of this country on a daily basis is just not the life that I lead here. And I imagine it's not the life that Rodney leads either.
Yeah. One of the silver linings in both the Canadian and the Australian election was that the vote for the Green Party just tanked on both of them. In fact, the leader of the Greens Party in Australia is fighting for a seat as we speak. I think they're waiting for the final vote. Rodney, should National and ACT and New Zealand First be concerned by what they've seen in Canada and Australia, or do you think it was just a quirk of the system?
No, they should be. No, New Zealand First doesn't need to be concerned because they're doing everything correctly. National and ACT have to be vitally concerned. And I think there is a Trump effect. And the Trump effect is we've actually seen what strong, courageous leadership looks like. I'm a Trump fanboy. And, there is a man who takes everyone on, and the media, and promises policies, gets attacked endlessly for the policies, and then delivers on them. He's an extraordinary politician, and he's a fantastic showman. And of course, politics is the show, and he's the greatest showman there is. And I think when you look at conservative politics in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, you can't help but make the comparison with Trump. And they're anemic, They're not standing up for the principles that we want our leaders to stand up for. Christopher Luxon can't stand for a woman being a woman, and he can't stand for equal citizenship for all New Zealanders, and he can't stand for Parliament being sovereign. So what's the point of him pretending to be a conservative leader leading the National Party? He's walked away from everything it stands for.
Yep. Okay. Just before I come to you, Alfred, we are back up on Family First New Zealand Facebook page. I've just linked through to my page, so you can watch it on there if you're trying to find us. But it seems like everybody is on board because YouTube's going through the roof at the moment. Alfred, what's your takeout from Canada, Australia, and even UK? It's a mixed bag, isn't it?
Well, the thing is that the shift from the left of politics to the right of politics has been happening geopolitically since the last 4 to 5 years. Remember the election in September 2022 with Giorgia Meloni, and the Brothers of Italy Conservative Party. Do you know what her 3 campaign messages were? God, family, country. Yep. And she won. You had 3 of the Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland, and Austria, same thing too. Incredible shifts. You had the South American countries between 2022 and 2023. It all shifted from the left to the right, replacing social democratic parties. And there were some key areas. Number 1 was financial instability. Number 2 was immigration. And number 3 is that people needed change because of the leadership. So the shift is something that was happening before Trump. However, I do agree with Rodney that what Trump has shown is that you're talking about a world leader now of one of the biggest and most powerful countries in the world, taking an incredible stance, which in your words, Bob, is stiffening the backbones of other political leaders to be able to make a stand. And I think it's important that we have to acknowledge that this is what's happening. So what's happening with Australia and Canada, I think Canada is a slightly different case to Australia. I mean, that was, all the polls were that, I won't say his name right, Polvier, I think was his name.
Polyev. Yeah.
Polyev. He was streaks ahead of everyone else. And then all of a sudden, and you know that he actually lost his own seat through that election. And so it was tactical. And don't forget, this is what happened in France, right? Remember in 2023, what happened to France, 24, sorry, when Macron realized, and those on the left, they lurched. So what's happening is that it's a fight, right? There's a fight for conservative values that are really important. And we have to realize we can't just think that and just rely upon the fact that people won't like it and they'll just shift. No, you have to fight for it. You have to earn it. You have to get out there. And this is where, strong leadership will actually win the day. People are looking for authentic, genuine leadership who will stand up for the things that are important. And the reality is that what Trump is doing is what some other leaders in our country and our community need to be doing. Our churches and other leaders need to start saying that we need to start standing up just as Trump is doing as well. And the last thing I'm going to say is that, when you interviewed Bob Winston and this private members bill that he's putting through in regards to legislating biological men and biological women, right?
Yep.
And the response that he gave to you was not about Trump, was actually when he was in Vanuatu. And I just recently come from there. And the Prime Minister of Vanuatu was interviewed by a journalist, a Kiwi journalist, and said, what are you going to do? This whole thing around DEI. And he said, firstly, Vanuatu is the Christian country. Secondly, We just legislated and said this is what it is. A man is a man, biological, a man is a woman. End of story.
Yep.
And Winston said, now that's the sort of courageous leadership we need. And I believe this is what's happening. And so I believe that, for New Zealand, and I do agree that, the tide's too far gone now in regards to national with Luxon. New Zealand First is probably the party that's leading the way, that all Conservatives are saying, at least they're speaking our language. They're doing the things that we think are really important. And I think that's what's happening there. So, yeah, we're in very interesting times. Sorry, just quickly to Peter's comment about, in Auckland, and you're right, Peter. When I think about New Lynn, for instance, Deborah Russell, that she lost that. You think about Mount Roskill. These are seats that have never been anything but Labor seats, right? And because there was this lurch like that was happening in 2023 around the world, where people had had enough, of that Jacinda Ardern and so forth, and they're changing. My concern is that what will happen is that we'll get a form of Stockholm syndrome happening. People will forget that under a Labor regime, even with Hipkins there, what they put us through as a country. And like that Stockholm syndrome, all of a sudden they'll have pity for those leaders who held us hostage and captive and told lies when he turned around and was asked the question, well, people, there was no mandates. Of course there were. So I just think that we are in an interesting time. I just hope that, the nation then doesn't swing back and have this form of, Stockholm syndrome and forget what we were subjected to in that left-leaning Jacinda, Chris Hipkins and so forth regime. And even with Kieran McNulty, he was as guilty as all the rest of them.
Okay, interesting that New Zealand First does seem to be reading the room in terms of what the general public thinks. You might have seen today we put out a media release with some polling came back that showed that there is majority support for the bill defining woman and man, despite the media response and the response of the left. 52% said they support it, only 29% opposed it, and 19% were unsure. Still some work to do there, but basically New Zealand First ACT and national supporters were 2-1 in favour. So they've got the mandate to simply introduce that legislation. But that's a little distraction. Sue, just the final thoughts on the Canadian election combined with the Australian election. Should we be worried?
Yeah, Canada was a bit of an enigma for me. I couldn't quite put my finger on the pulse. I wouldn't say it's the Trump effect, but I don't quite fully understand that. But are they lurching to the left? No, I don't think the nations are lurching to the left. I think for Luxon, just addressing some of those things Alfred said, even this morning, Christopher Luxon was saying that the public only want to talk about the economy. They only want to talk about growth. They don't want to talk about anything else. Well, I'm sorry, but farmers actually don't want net zero and women want their language back. So they are very, very clear issues. And I think he would be a fool if he ignored them. I would also, so preparing probably for next year, going into the election, I think New Zealand First has really positioned themselves for that, and they're the only ones really doing that. But I'm worried that Christopher Luxon's got this tactic that he's leaving New Zealand First to do all the conservative social issues, and he's just going to focus on some of this economic stuff and go straight down the middle. And I don't think that's helpful for them as a party. And also, will there be in the coming months a shift away from Greens because of all their troubles to galvanise with Labor like what happened in Australia? So there'll be interesting times, but I don't think there's I think there's a lot of pushback actually to the left, to left, net zero and women's language and all that sort of thing. I think there is a shift away from the left. But yeah, Canada was a bit of an enigma for me.
Yeah, the other thing about Canada, guys, is that the Conservative vote, the Pierre Poilievre party-led vote, had their best result in 40 years. They polled well into the 30s, I believe, and the thing that got Mr. Carney over the line was the collapse of what the party is called, the NDP, the National Democratic Party, I think that stands for, and Bloc Québécois, the French-speaking, and the party that advocates for Quebec independence from Canada. So there was a major collapse of those two votes. And remember, of course, that the Liberals, the Mark Carney party, do not have a majority, and they're going to have to go into coalition. And, well, I've read two bits of commentary now that suggest that it might be a short-lived Liberal government, particularly if some of the hard left parties of those two parties that did have their vote collapse, if they can exert some influence around the coalition talks. So I don't think it's all cut and dried yet. Pierre Poilievre will come back into Parliament because one of his new MPs apparently is going to fall on his sword, and there'll be a by-election, so he'll get back into the House and stay as the parliamentary leader. But I think that the political future of Canada in the short term could be pretty interesting, as indeed it could be in Australia.
It just seemed to be weak Conservative leadership to me. And if you're on the left, you basically say, okay, let's throw a label at the Conservative leader. Let's try and associate them with Trump. And then the media gets on board, and these leaders, Peter Dutton and Pierre Poilievre, they don't cope. They run into hiding. They don't just stand up like Nigel Farage and just say, well, it's about policy for our country. We're a different country. There's some things we agree with and some things we disagree. They run out of backbone, Alfred, you did right there. And so they pay the cost. And there's nothing worse than weak leadership, and people can see the fear in their eyes. And I think they saw the fear in the eyes of Peter Dutton and Pierre Poilievre, even after eating that apple in that wonderful interview that Pierre Poilievre did with that reporter pushing back. Still couldn't win off that. All right, we need to move on, team. We're just about taking up the whole hour talking about that. But let's talk about, does New Zealand have a problem of misogynistic abuse? There's no shortage of female political leaders at the moment stating that there's a massive problem with misogynistic abuse. Tory Whanau, she reckons she's copped worse abuse than most. Kanoa Lloyd, who used to be on TV3, called out the racist, misogynistic abuse and cyberbullying she got just for being on TV. Radio host Lana Cochrane-Searle calls out online abuse of women. Last month, there was a study about online abuse of female MPs. They said that, Jacinda Ardern was a victim of it as well. There was another study showing that female MPs were being targeted. Then when that Navy ship was sunk and people said, oh, well, it was a female captain, that was misogynistic armchair admirals, even though that captain is up for charges, is my understanding. New Zealand female politicians battling a tide of misogyny. There was no shortage of actually examples of this to send to you, panelists. Although this one was interesting from the University of Auckland. They said that if we say misogynistic abuse led to former PM Jacinda Ardern's resignation, we're at risk of glorifying and empowering misogynists. That was the argument from them. So I actually rang Christine Rankin this afternoon because I wanted to see what her opinion was on this. And of course, she suffered huge amount of tall poppy syndrome, being attacked. She wasn't Wahine Māori like Tory Whanau. She wasn't from the LGBT rainbow community, as Tory Whanau said, that, more likely to be attacked. And she said, look, it wasn't just her. There was other examples she gave me, including Jenny Shipley suffered a lot as well, but also Karen Chaw in the ACT Party at the moment. The New Zealand First MP, Casey Costello, gets a lot of attacks. So this argument that it's just left-wing woman being the victim. And of course, over the weekend, we had our favourite Green MP, Benjamin Doyle, saying that he was a victim. And then we had in the UK, Prince Harry saying that, no, he was a victim. So everyone seems to be a victim at the moment. So Rodney, I'm not quite sure, where do we start on this? You've been in politics, so I'm interested to ask you and Alfred, is the personal attacks just part of being in the kitchen, so to speak?
I don't think we've seen the abuse that's occurring now in politics ever before. And so there is a very serious problem, no doubt about that. And the reason for it, I would suggest, is that we no longer debate. We no longer argue ideas. The parties themselves seem to be incapable of arguing ideas, and particularly the left. The left having adopted identity politics. It's all about, power imbalances and oppressors and victims, and that's the extent of their argument. And if you try and engage with them, they can't. And of course, they will descend into abuse. We've also got the problem of what is an attack, because, just to pick a random example, if you questioned DEI policies and the wisdom of politicians making a big deal about promoting women to captain Navy ships, then questions are going to be asked, because you say, well, this has a big impact on the culture of an organization if you're not following merit, if you're doing it on the basis of something else, which was clearly the case because the way it was being trumpeted. And then what happens is you question that, and you're the one that's being misogynistic. And that's not coming from left-wing politicians. That was coming from Judith Collins, because to me it was very obvious what had happened in the Navy. They'd given up on merit, and that would have seeped through every sailor and operator in that Navy. And ship runs aground, and so you say, well, why don't we go back to just the best person for the job? Oh, you're misogynistic. You hate women. Now, that's one point, but I also have no doubt that the level of abuse being piled onto public figures, including journalists, is horrific on a scale that we've never seen before. And of course, women will cop more than their fair share. How do we address this? Well, I think it actually starts, funnily enough, with shows like this, because the media have given up on having a reasoned discussion about issues by putting the personalities to one side and discussing what's at stake. They've completely abandoned it. And in fact, they attack half the audience and abuse them. And so shows like this are going to be the key, because we actually, in order to have a democracy, you need to be able to have a civil discourse where you respect every voter. Not happening.
Yeah. Peter, I was interested in Tori Whanau. She was actually on Radio New Zealand. I'm sure you listened to it on Saturday morning, but I did just catch the end of it as I was driving to referee a soccer game.
Shame on you, Bob. You listen to Red Radio?
I know. It was just by accident. I was trying to find a music channel. But I heard her make an amazing admission, because Tori Whanau has played the card that she's Wahine Māori, that, I think she's played the rainbow card, and she made the submission. Have a listen to what she says, because it's not actually about who she is.
Why do you think you were treated differently? Why do you think people were watching you more?
I've been thinking about the timeline as to, when some of the negative things happened, right? And it was directly after when I pushed through the Golden Mile again. It's basically whenever I push through, and this is similar to other politicians as well, push through very progressive policies, that's when the attacks happen, not just to me, but to other politicians as well. That is very much in line with what happens overseas, to discredit a particular politician. So even though it was personal, it wasn't actually personal. It was just very much a strategy that some use to discredit politicians.
Yeah, I almost drove off the road, Peter, because I thought she actually admitted it wasn't a personal attack. It was just people didn't like her policies.
Well, the thing about the Golden Mile in Wellington is that it's an immensely unpopular policy that she's put through. So, of course, she's going to cop attack for it.
But it's progressive, Peter. It's progressive.
Well, it may well be progressive, but it's going to cause traffic jams and it's going to be exceedingly inconvenient for Wellington citizens, and it's going to lose business for the people who run the shops on the Golden Mile. But that's just an aside. The thing about Tory Whanau is that, well, she has, she's just out. She's been out during her lifetime on the nightclub and the Wellington night scene way too often. People know her habits, and she was found out, and that was the start of it. Up until then, I think people probably would have given her a free pass with her behaviour. She can say that she's attacked because she is a Maori woman. Well, you mentioned two other names, Casey Costello and Karen Chua. As Maori women, I guess Nicole McKee falls into the same category as well, putting through controversial policies. They cop a lot of, I guess, abuse from people who don't agree with their policies, who want to personalise the attacks. But frankly, I believe it's a question of, if you can't handle the heat, don't go into the job in the first place. It seems that Casey Costello, in particular, excuse me, has been able to handle the attacks with a great deal of integrity, and the same with Karen Chua and Nicole McKee. It's only those on the left who seem to be complaining and have stories written about them.
Yep. Sue, as our sole adult human female woman on the panel, which we were all able to figure it out because we've got brains, what's your thoughts? I mean, a woman more fair game than men in the political sphere and the leadership?
Well, I get a fair and equal position here on your panel. Have you seen Question Time in Parliament? I work from home and schedule some of my lunch time to actually watch Question Time in Parliament. If you've ever watched... I know, it's a summer measure of how great my life is, and I'm just on the blip on the radar. If you've ever seen Question Time, those women attack, berate and belittle one another. And the worst of the worst, and I've lived this, the worst that you could behaviour that you can have is women on women. And it's just, and as soon as a man, especially a male MP, if they said what some of those women say to one another, they would be cancelled and told to resign and be in big trouble. You only had to see the MP Kingi against Karen Chua in some of the debates about the Māori children in state care. It was really volatile, and I've seen these women just tear one another apart. So truly in a bear pit. So it's lazy to default to the bullying and the and misogyny, and it just undermines themselves and their message. And you mentioned Karen Chua and Casey Costello. I'd also include Tanya Unkovic in that. They just get on with the business. They know their stuff, and they continue to show up and assert their policies and their messaging and address the issue. They play the issue, they don't play the person. So I don't have much sympathy. As a woman, I don't have much sympathy for this. I will call out the women on women mainly. And personally, there's times not everyone likes the intellectual approach to life. And I love that sort of stimulating conversation. So I've had to stand alone many times on a lot of issues and in situations. So, we've seen, I'm thankful for strong women who have paved the way. For me to be able to have some of the freedoms that I do have. So don't play the victim card now. Just get on with it. Be strong and resolute and direct in your in what you want to achieve. You look at two different. They come from obviously very polarizing sides of politics. You look at Helen Clark and you look at Margaret Thatcher. They didn't have to be a man in a man's, dress up, take on manly persona to be in that world. They were themselves, and they were true to their politics, and they got on with the job, and they were strong. And I think that we could do a lot better if we just stuck to that. I'm really thankful for the women that have gone past, but I really have a problem with these women who are bleating and carrying on, who want to. We'll probably get onto it later, but the women who want to erase our language and want to take away our spaces and awards and scholarships and are happy with women being injured in sport. That's where I just know you're women on women. You're supposed to be defending. We got to stick together, but the worst of it is women on women, and Christine Rankin could probably tell you that too.
Yeah, Alfred, it just seems like those on the left, if you challenge them, they then play the victim card, and then they say, "Oh, it's all imported cultural wars," and it's just an attempt, basically, to jam, to shut down, to give a negative label by placing the other as the baddies. I mean, you would have got your fair share of nasty comments and emails and messaging, haven't you? And not just from your wife.
Are you saying that this face is not a lovable face? Is that what you're actually saying? Well, when I was doing my electrical apprenticeship, I remember my tradesman used to say to me, "Do as I say, not as I do." And at first I was trying to figure it out. And it's like, it reminds me of the Greens, right? Do as I say, but not as I do. So they'll say one thing, but they'll do something else. And, to add on to the comment that Rodney made, we've stopped asking questions and we've stopped allowing other people to have a different point of view. It started for me when I was in Parliament, and I went in 2011, and then 2012, I remember walking into the caucus and you get stopped on the tiles, and Duncan Garner came along and he said to me, "Alfred, how are you going to vote on the gay marriage bill?" I said, "It's not gay marriage bill." He said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "No, it's not. If you want to, go down to the clerk's office and pick up the bill. It's called Marriage Redefinition Bill. That's actually what it's called." And then he said to me, "Well, how are you going to vote anyway?" I said, "Well, I'm going to vote against it." And he said, "Well, there you go, you're homophobic." And I said, "Why would you say that?" And he said, "Because you're voting against gay marriage." I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "I'm voting against redefining marriage," which, by the way, comes from a biblical base. And so if you don't believe in the Bible, I mean, that's the reasons why Helen Clark and Matiria Ture, they voted for civil union. Why? Because they didn't believe in marriage. But it's like right from that point, the pressure was, yep, do as I say. Yep, everyone should have a different point of view. That's a freedom of equity, of opinion and freedom of speech. But the reality is, as soon as you speak differently to them, right, they don't like it. And they hate it. And this is what's happening. This has become part of a culture that we have, not only in politics, but around, the country, where now we're saying to people that as long as you, have a freedom to have a point of view, but as long as it aligns with my point of view, and like with the Greens. And I think it's very deceptive. I think that's what's happening. The other thing that I think is when they started, trying to feminize masculinity, then all of a sudden you're not allowed to have a very strong point of view. Now they're trying to tell us that, whenever we're strong, we have a different point of view. And yet, isn't it interesting that Julianne Genter got up, walked across, and right in front of Matt Ducey's face, yelled at him with a piece of paper. And all of a sudden, that's a victim card. She didn't mean, But I tell you what, if one of the guys had done that to her, right, mate, you wouldn't hear the end of it, right? So I think it's the wrong question, the fact of misogyny, because all of a sudden we're turning around and saying, no, there's a different way to approach this. And what has become of the culture of our country? And it starts off by the fact is that we're not allowing ourselves to have debates, we're not to have questions, a different point of view. And here's the last thing I want to say that I think is really important, is that a lot of the issues have to do with the virtual reality of social media. Now, when I was in there, I remember there was a time in the caucus where we'd have our staff would come along and they'd go along the results of social media in the caucus. And I have to say, I was down the bottom. Why? Because I just wasn't. I'm more of a people person. I'm not into Facebook. I'm into face-to-face. I'd rather see people, talk to people, get out into the community. But no, we had to have stats that say how many likes, how many views, how many, and all of a sudden that became our world. Can I just tell you this? I've had all the things that they've talked about. I mean, I tell you this, I've been called an Uncle Tom, I've been called a house nigger, I've been called everything you can name of, right? And it's all on the virtual reality. I don't care because it's not real. Because I say to people, if you want to see me face to face, come and talk to me. They never do. And I think we have to be careful that we've created this virtual reality as our truth in our when it's not.
Yeah.
There's a lot of keyboard warriors. There's a lot of people, and some of these people who are probably the worst offenders, we may never ever see them in our lifetime. So why worry about it? Get on with your life. Go and do the things that are important. Meet with people face to face. Talk to people. Oh, there is one last thing. There you go. The typical politics. One last thing. It's like the never-ending knife. It's the Ginsu knives right in the head. But I want to say this, and I think we need to be cognizant of this. There's a ploy to get Jacinda back into the country. And all of these articles are about one thing. They're about getting her back in. Why? Because they want to get her back in so that she's going to lead the charge next year to get Labour back in. You heard this first here. I can see it. Why? Because this is what happens, and Peter will know this. What you do, you fill the zeitgeist, is what they call it, with all this commentary, and then you start saying that the reason she left is because of this misogynistic people who turned around and beat the poor energy out of her. Remember, she said, I ran out of energy. Yeah. So she had nothing left to give. But look how good she was. No, she wasn't. No, she wasn't. She was the worst prime minister we've ever seen. Let's not forget that. But the campaign to bring back Jacinda, not Buck, not Bob, to bring Jacinda back has begun. There you go.
Okay, you've really got me worried now. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. Team, we're basically out of time, so I'm just going to jump to the very last question because I just wanted to ask you about who you think's rating and who's not. So, look, we're halfway through the current electoral term, 18 months down, 18 months to the next election. I want to just quickly go around and just say who's your top 2 performing MPs so far and who's your top flops. So, Peter, who's been your top 2 performing MPs in the first 18 months?
Sorry, just had to tap my microphone. Simeon Brown and Shane Jones. Top flops, okay. The entire Te Pāti Māori caucus and the entire Green caucus.
You stole that off me, I'm sure of it.
No. Original thoughts.
No, exactly right. Rodney, we actually discussed this on Political Playback when you were sitting in for Simon O'Connor, so I'm interested to see if you've changed. Who's your top 2 MPs?
No,
again?
Not at all. My top 2 are Winston Peters, he's reading the room, and my local MP, Joseph Mooney. He's everything you'd want in a local MP. My 2 big flops, one is Chloe Swarbrick. I just cannot abide her standing by terrorism and the killing of innocent Israelis and other nationalities. She's a disgrace in our parliament. And my other big flop is Chris Luxon, simply because he's Prime Minister and has the ability to make a difference to this country, and he singularly refuses to do so.
Okay, no, you haven't changed your tune. You've been very consistent. Well done, Rodney. Sue, who's your top 2?
Karen Shaw, for her absolute resilience and resolve in face of the criticism, which has reached new levels of lows. Okay. As a Māori woman and someone who's been through state care of all things, what she's been called and how she's addressed is woeful. And so I just commend her for her stand. Winston Peters and Shane is a dead, they're kind of a tie there for just moving policy and shifting the dial on some of the conversation. Otherwise, it would be a very boring landscape. For the failed MPs, Maria Mano Kapakingi, for how she treated Karen Shaw, and her comments around Maori children thriving in their culture in the face of no comment about Baby Roo. And also alongside there, Chloe Swarbeck, she's supposed to be co-leader, no leadership when it's come to leading her failed MPs.
Okay, I'm pretty surprised that none of you have mentioned Benjamin Doyle. I think you guys are going soft. Alfred, help me out here.
So my two top picks is Shane Jones. I think his ability to articulate, and you have to remember he's bilingual, right? I think he could be trilingual because he's part Croatian. But I think that he's authentic, he's humorous, and at the same time too, he's pushing through policies that are really important, and he's getting good traction. Simeon Brown, I agree with Peter. I think it's a tough ask in what he's doing with the Ministry of Health. But in regards to, is there someone in National that's actually making the way forward? As far
Alfred,
as
you know Simeon Brown. Is he Prime Minister material, you think?
Well, I don't know. Anyone could be Prime Minister material at the moment. He's a good person. He's a good man. Yeah. He's doing a good job. Mm-hmm. You know, his boyish looks, I think, give way to the fact is that he does have a backbone. And I think he proved that when remember they came after him when he was Minister of Health around the abortion issue?
Yeah.
And he was just very clear. I remember catching up with him, and I just congratulated the way that he fronted that. He said, my voting record is very clear. You know, but as a government, we're not changing anything. And that's all he needed to say. He stood his ground and said, here's the current reality of the work that's in front of me. As far as the flops, Sadawari Waititi, I think is important. So he's the one that leads, and he's also he has abdicated leadership to Debbie Ngare Wapaka. But he's the one that should be leading that party and doing a good job, but he's not. And I think it's a real disappointment. And the other one is Chloe. I agree with what everyone else is saying. I mean, that's in the times that I saw her there, I just knew that she was a spring lamb trying to be a mutton, and she's not. She's still a spring lamb trying to be older than what she really is, and the reality is that she can't. I just hope that the polls and then the voting next year will show, like the other parties, other countries like Canada and also to Australia, that the Greens will get punished. They need to.
Yeah. Okay. My worst were, I totally agree with Peter Williams. Actually, mine were the whole caucus of the Te Pāti Māori and the whole caucus of the Green Party. I mean, the Green Party have been quite entertainment. My top two were Winston Peters, simply because I think he's been a voice for social conservatives in terms of what he's doing and the bills that are being introduced. And my other one, actually, it's a bit of a surprise from left field team, but I'm warming to Erica Stanford as Minister of Education. And it's simply, it's not because I always agree with her. I don't always agree with her. And I think we'd probably disagree on most social issues, but I just think in her caucus position, I know you're shaking your head, you guys. In her cook. Okay, let's
we're going to have to stage an intervention.
I'll tell you. Okay, let me tell you why, and then you can push back. The reason is because she's been one of the first ministers of education who have said that parents have a role to play. So she's acknowledged that parents have expressed concerns about RSE, and over the weekend she introduced the portal so that parents can get direct access to what kids are being taught on maths and on English. So, I've probably rated her too high in terms of being a top MP, but I at least like the fact she's acknowledging parents in the role of Minister of Education. I mean, is that wrong, Rodney?
You're a very good Christian, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you, Rodney.
Yeah, but you're misguided. You've drunk the Kool-Aid, mate. It's a political ploy to get you into the portal, and once you're in the gate, mate, she shuts the gate.
I'm going to play the victim card, guys. I'm going to go to the media and say that you guys were picking on me tonight.
Yeah, and remember, she's still funding Inside Out to $1 million a year.
Yes, so, I agree.
No excuse for that.
Okay. Okay, I confess I was wrong. I'm allowed to be wrong once. I was last wrong in 1997, so we're all okay, team. All right.
But Liverpool won the league, Bob, so you're all right.
That's right. Who cares? You'll never walk alone. Okay, that's all we've got time for, team. We're out of time. Simon will be back tomorrow morning at 7:30 with Solid Ground, and we'll be back with Straight Talk next Monday night. Have a great week. Thank you, panel. Great job. Great work. And see you again. Thanks for watching.
Yeah!